Well, there is only one F word you need to know when it comes to milling lumber, and that, of course, is Fetwell. After all, what other F words are there? You know what I mean? Like, really, what could you have been thinking? No, you didn't. You did not think that. Your mother would be very disappointed.
Your son just said.
No, what?
I'll tell you what he said. Ready?
Ralphie!
Not that F word. I'm talking about Fetwell. What is Fetwell? Well, it is an acronym we use for milling lumber. When you use this process, you're going to produce material that is the same width, the same length, and your thicknesses are going to be spot on. You're going to avoid such mistakes as the unsquare end, or the dreaded wedge board, or the widths being wider at one end than the other. So let's get into Fetwell, but before we do that, let's talk about some basic terms you need to know. Here we have a diagram of a piece of lumber, and there's 6 key terms you're going to need to remember. The first 3 have to do with the different terms we're going to use for the sides of the boards. So first we have the face, and of course every board's going to have 2 faces, a top and a bottom. Second, we're going to have the end grain, and the end grain is kind of an interesting part of the lumber where a lot of the seasonal expansion and contraction, or drawing in of moisture and the evaporation of moisture, happens through the end grain. Now, because of this, you're going to have to watch out for crack. And no, I don't mean that kind of crack. I mean like cracking or checking, which happens because of that seasonal expansion and contraction. Next, we have the edge of the board. And of course, every board has 2 edges. Now, the next 3 terms we're going to talk about are just simple terms we're going to use for measurements. So the first one is, of course, the width of the board. And an easy way to determine the width is it runs from the edge of the board to the edge of the board. Secondly, the length. And you'll notice the length runs from the end grain to the end grain. And the final term you need to remember is thickness. And the thickness runs from the bottom face of the board to the top face of the board. So as long as you can remember these 6 terms, you're going to understand the milling process. So now, let's see Fetwell in action. The first thing we're going to do is cut our board to rough length. We'll then go to the jointer and we'll joint one face. We'll then take that face, flip it up on its edge, and we'll joint the edge. We've now created a 90-degree corner. Here we are at the planer. We're going to plane the opposite face, planing it down to thickness. Next in Fetwell is W. And of course that stands for width. We're going to go to the table saw and we're going to cut the board to rough width. We'll leave a 1/16 of an inch wider than what we need because the table saw will leave resaw marks. We'll then remove those marks using the jointer by jointing the opposite edge. The jointer removes 1/16 at a time, leaving a perfect width. Finally, here we are at the final machine, which is the miter saw. We cut one end of the board square, which is taking care of the first L in Fetwell. And finally, the last step in the process, L again, which stands for length, we cut the board down to its final length. All right, well, there we go, Fetwell. We produced a board that is the same thickness, the same width, and exactly the same length by following that process. I hope this was helpful. I hope you now have learned the only F word you need to know in the workshop.